In the course of the First World War, mind-altering agents were used for both medical and non-therapeutic purposes, and they were issued by the authorities as well as self-prescribed by soldiers. Sedative drugs such as alcohol, morphine, Snow White, and opioids helped soldiers to subdue the physical and emotional pain and to relax and alleviate the horrors of combat, but not without a cost. This was a time before drug regulation and awareness, and things could not have been different than any other war that followed. Welcome to Nutty History. Today, let's find out what drugs were like in the Great War of 1915 to 1919 and how it helped people. When it comes to pain relievers, sadly, little had changed in the time between the American Civil War and the beginning of the First World War. The art of analgesics was still all about morphine, as the controversial narcotic was routinely administered to subdue the pain of the wounded. And there was no end to the number of casualties among the servicemen. Shrapnel from exploding shells was ripping flesh and shattering bones, causing ghastly wounds to the kidney, lungs, and bladder, as well as facial mutilations. Injuries like these caused agonizing suffering, torment that could only be countered by the most potent analgesic, morphine sulfate, aptly named after the Greek god of sleep, Morpheus. But morphine is not a narcotic to be taken lightly, pun intended. During the initial treatment and dressing of wounds, frontline medics mark patients' foreheads with crosses in permanent ink after administering the morphine, in order to prevent drug overdose at further stages of medical care. A widely accepted recommended dose was 1/4 of grain or 16 milligrams. But despite all precautions, patients were mistakenly issued the narcotics more than once, and the badly injured were deliberately given larger amounts to ease their very severe pain. Due to the chaos caused by the war, it was simply proving to be near impossible to avoid such mistakes. On top of that, the wounded self-medicated themselves with morphine while awaiting professional aid. One of the downsides of a morphine overdose was the drug obscuring the clinical picture and hampering a proper diagnosis. Often, the personnel at clearing stations and hospitals could not determine whether a patient's condition resulted from the excessive intake of morphia or his wounds. The concerns over persisting morphine addiction and overconsumption in military infirmaries had a bunch of physicians arguing that patients would be better off to undergo the pain until they reached advanced treatment stations. Perhaps the most famous of these patients-turned-morphinist was a fighter pilot ace and later powerful member of the Nazi elite and commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring. Yet, as no equally potent alternative was available, morphine remained the preferred choice for pain relievers. But this was the day and age when opioids not only ruled the analgesics, but were also the preferred method to make babies sleep peacefully at night. And that was the generation called the Greatest Generation. We're not even joking. Morphine was also used for euthanizing soldiers who were maimed beyond recovery, and a lethal injection was the only way to put them to rest. A British private, recalling heavy casualties in the Battle of Aubers Ridge in May of 1915, remembered a man who had no eyes, no nose, no chin, no mouth, and yet he was alive. As the medicine was not advanced enough to deal with such horrendous casualties, a 4-fold humanitarian dose of morphine was administered to put victims out of their misery, but often doctors and sergeants would lack the courage to do the necessary thing, and they had to rely on nurses and privates. Other analgesics used in World War I, apart from morphine sulfate, were sodium salicylate and opii tinctura camphoratum. Morphine sulfate was also a popular solution for anesthetic along with good old chloroform and goprelto. Goprelto, for the unaware, is the hydrochloride salt form of the tropane alkaloid Snow White, with central nervous system stimulating and local anesthetic activity. Yes, the same Snow White that grows naturally in cocoa leaves in South America and is responsible for the rise of some of the biggest narcos of the last 50 years. But back in the First Great War, Taxi was thundering through the trenches. In the 19th century, Europeans discovered the Andean people's secret of using the cocoa leaves for physical endurance. Once Snow White was isolated from cocoa leaves in 1859, a German pharmaceutical company, Merck of Darmstadt, launched its manufacture and marketing in 1862. Interestingly, back then, Aunt Nora was described as a stimulant that in a particular way adapted to elevate the working ability of the body without any dangerous effect. The concerned narcotic was tried in the military for the first time in 1883. Theodor Askenbrandt, the Bavarian army physician who carried out these experiments, recognized the potential utility of the drug and its appetite-suppressing effect and supposed that it could help reduce army food supplies by up to 20%. This and the stimulating properties of Snow White were the reasons why the drug was so widely used in the Great War. When war broke out, Colombian Blow was easily available at pharmacies in Europe and America, both as a sold medicine and as an ingredient in many popular medications and tonics used for a runny nose and coughing. In fact, one of the most popular American medicines, Rhino's hay fever, was nothing but pure Snow White. Back in the day, tobacco and happy powder were considered equally harmless. Oh, how wrong our great-grandparents were. Apart from being used as a local anesthetic, Snow White was issued by the military authorities for enhancement purposes. Soldiers could even purchase it by themselves if they felt the need for it. It was so widely common that the rate of its consumption by fighting men remains unknown, and there is no way to estimate the figures. The drug was the morale booster, the fuel for the inner fire, and the overall mood enhancer in the trenches. It helped soldiers calm down, focus, and improve performance. The drug was taken during long-distance flights by German fighter pilots, and as French records revealed, early airmen were particularly keen on the stimulant. The drug helped air duelists to make use of the cold up there by fortifying them against it. However, the popularity of the Colombian drug was far more intense in infantry than airmen. The German Army Command planned at the dawn of war to issue each of its soldiers daily rations of Snow White to decrease their appetite and increase stamina. The only reason that this ridiculous idea was abandoned was that there was not enough supply of the drug in question. The British, on the other hand, were also distributing the drug under the code name Forced March and issued it in the form of a gelatin-coated pill. Along with Snow White, this little bugger also had cola nut extract to bring out the flavor of the blow. The famous store Harrods was offering smaller sets of morphine and Snow White with syringes and needles. It was advertised in the Times as a useful present for friends at the front, while well-known pharmacy Savory and More was selling a mail-order medical kit containing Snow White and Smack. The acceptance for Lady Snow didn't last for the entire war. While France was accusing Germany of smuggling the happy powder into French cities and trenches to subvert their war efforts, there were wide protests against the use of the drug in Britain as well. The media and politicians of Britain were fueling a nationwide drug scare against the Colombian Blow and had branded the narcotics deadlier than the enemy bullets. This hysteria was the outcome of a Canadian major discovering in 1916 that a London-based escort and her agent were supplying the Blow to his units. The investigation revealed that some 40 men in a local camp had developed an addiction. The incident, highly publicized, worked in favor of the proponents of introducing tight governmental control of habit-forming drugs. The case provided a convenient pretext for launching the anti-drug campaign, which found fruitful soil in the nation's wartime anxieties and suspicions. By late 1915, Merck experienced a dramatic fall in the annual production of white gold down to merely 447 kilograms, compared to nearly 9,000 kilograms in 1913. The war had interrupted international trade and impeded the supply of European factories with Peruvian cocoa leaves. With politicians and media drawing on paranoia, the moral panic regarding the Blow created a general movement against drugs. On May 11, 1916, the Army Council of Britain issued an order banning any unauthorized sale or supply of psychoactive substances to any member of the armed forces, except for medical reasons and only by prescription. On one hand, World War I facilitated greater consumption of narcotics like Snow White and morphine, but it also paved the path for comprehensive national substance control regimes. It may not have been able to entirely abolish the use of drugs in warfare, as evident by the use of amps in the Second World War and smack in the Vietnam War, but it sure was the first step to recognize and address the ill effects of such substances on soldiers. Tell us in the comments, which other war would you like for us to cover in this series? And as always, thanks for watching. Nutty History.